Hello, Alabama fans, and welcome back to the BamaOnLine.com Big Show. We're here. I'm site publisher Tim Watson. We're here with team extraordinaire Charlie Potter, also very humble. He just flew in on his jet. No, I'm just kidding. I have those headphones. They just don't work for me. I don't know if I can't control. I don't hear anything else, so it drives me crazy. But you sound great and you look great, Charlie. How are you doing?
Good. I like these headphones. I got some noise canceling headphones. I think I got these last season. I just found myself like hearing too much around the room or like in the press box. And I was like, I need to solve this. And they work perfectly for this too. Like if there's like we got a wife, we got cats in the house. If they're loud,
Yeah.
I don't hear what's going on.
Yeah, I think it scares me that I can't hear what everybody else is doing. That's
Yeah,
part
that's
of
true. That's
that's
true.
part of the control freak with me. Anyways, an interesting game. Obviously, I mean, 57 minutes, 55 minutes. It was a different ball game from the last five. Before we really get into the game, we want to ask you guys to take a minute and subscribe to the website. It's been doing great. We really enjoy it. The site's grown. We've passed 10,000. We're trying to get to 20,000 and catch Georgia. So hit that subscribe button, give us a like, and we appreciate y'all being here. Charlie, before we really get into the South Florida game and kind of break that down a little bit, tell us. I really think we should touch on the Saban Field dedication because, before that was kind of a big deal, but when the game got so sideways, so to speak, we really haven't talked about it as much. And I mean nationally, I don't mean us specifically. So give us your thoughts on the Saban Field dedication because anytime Julio Jones is there, it's a big damn deal, right?
Yeah, I mean, before the game, you could see a bunch of former players, and we've talked about it. We talked about it last week, how they were going to recognize the 2014 team. So we saw, Blake Sims, Landon Collins, Justin Fowler. I think those were your honorary captains, but you can see a lot more. And Julio's hard to miss, and he
Yeah.
definitely he garners a crowd. But before the game, Blake and I were at the kind of the head of the Walk of Champions for the unveiling of like the signage out front. And while it was hot as hell out there, it was nice to see. It was a cool moment for him to be able to stand up there and kind of address the fans and then unveil that. And then he and Miss Terry and their kids and grandchildren did kind of one last walk down the Walk of Champions, which was also nice. And then they got to go in the stadium kind of before anybody else and see everything. And then, yeah, he watched an ugly first half for sure. And
Yeah.
then at halftime, he kind of did like one last walk out of the tunnel to Thunderstruck. And
Yeah.
I think that gave the crowd some juice, some much needed
Yeah.
juice. Heck, Kendrick Law was fired up coming out after the half with the kickoff return and then lost the
Yeah.
ball. So I
Yeah.
think overall, it was a cool night to see all that stuff. I'm in the camp that I think it should be more than just the field dedication. I think his name should be on the stadium. But it's the way they did it with, kind of the sign you see when you drive down University. It says Saban Field right when the players go into the stadium. It's all over the place. So I think for the decision they made, they did a good job of really representing him in a lot of places. And I think Saban and Miss Terry and their family are really pleased and honored by it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Charlie and I are very big into movies and cinema. And sometimes in real life, you see moments that if we saw in a movie, we'd be like, get the hell out of here. But for Nick Saban to be in the end zone, ready to be dedicated, and there to be a long run by Jalen Milroe, and it to be called back for a penalty, they go to Nick Saban, who's just like, I mean, it was an unbelievable moment. Not a great moment, but really a hilarious moment to have Nick Saban in that end zone, seeing that penalty on a huge run.
Yeah, I don't know if he necessarily, which he would have no clue about what we're talking about, but I don't think he anticipated becoming a meme on the night that he was being dedicated at the stadium, but that certainly
Yeah.
happened. I don't remember who I saw it first on my timeline, but then once it happened, it was just kind of the rest of the second half. There was just a ton of those popping up, but no, he was everywhere on Saturday. Started out in Ann Arbor and then ended up in Tuscaloosa. And we were talking about before we started recording, we got a kind of a look into his office with a photo that Alabama put out with him talking to Julio Jones. And it's so funny because it looks almost identical to the office that he had over at the Malmore building, but it's now at Bryant Denny. And I'm pretty sure it's the only office in that entire building. And that's a big ass building with the old wood grain that he had in his office over off Bryant Drive. So Saban's a creature of habit. And for him to be disappointed on a long touchdown run that was called back by penalty, I don't think that should come as much of a surprise.
The craziest part to me, and I swear this is true, is when I saw the photo of Saban and Julio, I thought it was a flashback photo of Saban recruiting Julio. I thought that was the whole moment. And then later on, I saw it again. I'm like, holy crap! I'd seen Julio on the field. I realized he's wearing the same thing, and I was like, wow. Again, I can appreciate that creature habit. I'm that way. I mean, I try to when I have a pair of shoes I like, I try to buy that same pair when I get rid of them. It looks like I've had one pair of shoes for 20 years if I've done this right. Anyway, give us some of your thoughts on the game. I mean, you saw this last year firsthand with South Florida, which we thought was the ugliest game, one of the ugliest games. And again, the lightning and the delays, and then from home, if you're watching it, they went to a home video camera that filmed the Blair Witch Project. They got rid of the ESPN camera, so that game, what I thought was kind of the weirdest, but this one, it probably rivaled it right there, don't you think?
Yeah, the good thing is I don't think this game was ever filmed on what looked like a potato, so that's good in and of itself for those watching at home. But yeah, I think it was a 4-hour game. It tried to match last year's game because of the rain delay. It was a long one. It was kind of gross at times, but I think there were some positives to take away. Obviously, the penalties, the pass rush, the explosive runs given up. That's not what you want to see. I thought the defense played pretty well, just in terms of what they were able to do. And then Kane Wommack yesterday gave kind of an opening
Oh,
statement for the ages, just in terms of length and intel. And he shared what he liked, what he didn't like, and those explosive runs were big. The touchdown they gave up were big, just in terms of disappointing things for him. But I thought the defensive line, especially Tim Keenan, played really, really well.
yeah,
I thought Justin Jefferson played well before his ejection, and he's going to have to miss the first half of the Wisconsin game. But offensively, the offensive line struggled, especially Will Conformby and some of the other guys with those holding penalties. Jalen didn't have a lot of time back there to throw, and they took a lot of deep shots too. I thought that was kind of interesting. Maybe with the pressure that they're facing, try to get it out quicker. Maybe get some screens, some bubble plays mixed in there. That's kind of an old staple of some older Alabama offenses. And maybe, look, granted, this is the first 2 games of the season. I think this is what people need to hear. Alabama's not going to just dig deep into their bag in terms of revealing things. They're saving that for this week and a couple weeks against Georgia and later on down the season. So I think they didn't necessarily panic, and I think that showed with what they were able to do late in the fourth quarter. They just kind of stuck to their guns and put Elijah Pritchett in the game and started mauling people. So I think we'll see more of that. I'll be interested to see what happens with the offensive line this Saturday, just in terms of availability of some guys. But I thought there was plenty of good mixed in with some bad, that I think that gives them something to work on. And I think that's the biggest thing, is hearing from Kalen DeBoer. Is he said you need games like this.
sure, you do, yeah.
After a 63-0 win in week 1, you don't have much to tell guys, at least in terms of what they're going to hear, because they think that was a damn near perfect game. But to have a sloppy game like this going into the kind of the meat of your schedule, I don't know if it's necessarily needed, but to have things to work on, that's not a bad thing if you're a coach.
No, I agree. I mean, you run that first game out. I mean, the film study probably lasted on Sunday 30 minutes, at tops. There wasn't a lot to gripe about. But this one, they probably woke up at 7 a.m. and burned, burned it on both ends. Tell you, you touched on this earlier, and before we bring Blake Byler in, I have to really pronounce. I was calling him Blinder. I'm telling you, there should be that Blake Byler is not a real name. But anyways, we'll bring Blake in a minute. But Kane Wommack, is he the most honest coach in America? I mean, he's out there. He looks like he's actually doing the sideline show on ESPN, breaking down plays for us, because everybody's like, the secondary's getting burned, the secondary's getting burned. And then he broke it down and explained it to us, and it made sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think Kane's a favorite for those in the room that are covering the team.
Sure.
Kalen DeBoer is just super positive. That's just, I think fans are going to have to get used to that. Is he's not going to bash the team for anything, and he's gonna kind of tell it like it is. But that's just him. He is a positive and personable person. But Kane Wommack is. He's very transparent. He's very thorough with his answers. He has some buzzwords that he repeats quite a bit, but I think for the most part, when he comes out there and then he starts off by, commending Q Robinson for playing on Saturday, which I think is
Yeah,
deserved because of, him playing 2 days
sure.
after losing his father. But then to break down the full game, and you think, okay, here comes the questions. And then he goes, oh yeah, by the way, here's my thoughts on Wisconsin. Like he's talking for like 7 minutes before taking questions, and then takes
Yeah.
a ton of questions. So I think for Kane Wommack, you could tell he's a former head coach, and he's a former head coach at a smaller school. He understands the power of access and exposure, and
Sure.
I think with that, he's just willing to. He's not giving away any trade secrets. Let's make
No.
that clear. He's not giving away the playbook or things that they're doing, but he answers the questions thoroughly and thoughtfully. And I think from my point of view, that's very much appreciated.
Now explain to us real quick, and let's go ahead and bring Blake Byler in.
Bang.
Blake, welcome to the show. We're glad to have you. He's our youngest and most enthusiastic young where he's been with us a month. Does a great job. I texted him the other day. You did an outstanding job. Charlie will tell you if you don't hear from me, you're kicking ass. I have to talk to Andrew Bone every 30 minutes if that gives you any reference. So welcome to the show, Blake, and it's great to have you. But real quick, Charlie and Blake, touch on what Kane Wommack explained about those guys getting deep. I found that fascinating with his reference to Oklahoma State, running those different receivers out, tiring them out. Explain to the people to make sure they heard how that happened.
Yeah, I think if people were watching early in the game, you could see two or three plays where Alabama's young defensive backs were caught just kind of chasing a receiver, and if Byron Brown was accurate with the ball, those would have been big plays, if not touchdowns, for Alabama. And Womack kind of highlighted two of them, and he talked about one how they were going fast and they had a substitution issue, so that was just putting a corner in a tough spot, and that makes total sense whenever you go back and think about it. They've been rotating those corners in quite a bit. I think we saw a little bit less of that this past week because Damani Jackson and Xavier Brown played a ton of reps, but we still saw Deshaun Jones and Jalen Blockway. So those young guys were kind of put in a tight spot. And then the second one, it's more of a technique error, and I think that's kind of something that they preach to the defensive backs. Is something they picked up in film study, is where they deny the outside release. So an inside fade release is less likely to be successful for the offense, just from a probability standpoint, I guess. So that was something that they kind of cut off, but still they weren't in perfect position in terms of being behind the receiver. But that's probably the thing that saved them there, is just being able to deny that outside release and force a guy inside, and that kind of takes the connection with the quarterback and wide receiver out there. So yeah, as someone that feels like they know a little bit about football, anytime that a coach will go through and kind of explain something like that, you still feel like you're a student and learning things. And I appreciate that, because
I agree.
you obviously aren't watching film or spending as much time as these coaches. So for him to be able to do that and do it in a non-condescending way at the same time, I think is very valuable, not just to us as reporters, but for fans alike.
Yeah, he's probably a hell of a teacher. Those kids probably get an easy view. He's got an easy way of going to, talking about him and talking to people. Blake, give us some thoughts now. We've kind of covered that first half, but let's pick up in the second half where Saban Field, big penalty. They're finally hitting on all cylinders. And we start with the Kendrick Law kickoff, and it just, your heart went out to him. He just dropped the ball, baby. I mean, he got punched out a little, but it wasn't much of a punch.
Yeah, I mean, the second half, you kind of had a couple what seemed like kind of fluky, I would say, turnovers with the Kendrick
Yeah.
Law fumble on what looked like, me and Charlie were talking during the play, and we thought he could have cut outside and had a seam and maybe taken the kick all the way. And then if I remember right, I think was the Jam Miller fumble the next possession for Alabama, or was it? It was in that second half, I think. So both looked like big plays that you had coming, where both ended up with fumbles. And then also on top of that, you had Jalen Milroe taking a snap under center in the red zone, which is something that I'm assuming he's not accustomed to doing. And it's also that's just a mishandle by the quarterback. It's really hard to blame the center for a bad snap when it's under center. So I wouldn't go as far as to say that Parker Brailsford had two straight games with a bad snap turnover. But those kind of turnovers put Alabama in some tough spots. And I thought their defense really responded pretty well to those, having to face multiple short fields, having to face an offense with some momentum coming off of a turnover multiple times. I think the only touchdown they gave up in the game came off of a short field. So USF never drove the full length of the field and scored a touchdown. And a couple of those times with short fields, they forced them into field goals. They got into the red zone, forced field goals. So Kane Wommack talked about kind of the Marvel reference, the hold the line that kind of this defense has embraced. And we've seen that with a lot of success in the red zone kind of touching on what Charlie said, I thought the defense played a really good game. I thought Tim Keenan had a great game inside, and he was honored as the SEC Defensive Lineman of the Week for his performance. There was one sack where he just took the guard and literally bull rushed the entire way and got to the quarterback. And that's just an insane amount of power from a defensive lineman, and something that you really want to see as far as your kind of pass rush goes, because you have that power inside, but then you also have speed on the outside with Q Robinson and guys like that. So I thought the defense played well. They were a big reason that Alabama wasn't in even more of a precarious spot because of the couple turnovers that the offense had and the struggles that they had had up to that point.
Yeah, I think a couple times in the first half, and they fixed this in the second half, you had James Smith, who's a young guy, hasn't played a lot. He over pursued. And, Christian Barmore used to do that. Like, if you ran a double reverse on Barmore, he had never, in it for a minute, know where that ball was. I saw James over pursuing that a little bit. They kind of buckled that down in the second half. Skipping to Milroe's performance, the one thing that stood out to me, and I want both y'all to touch on this, is in the first half, he did that, keep extending the play. I'm going to extend the play. I'm going to extend the play. But in the second half, he did what Kalen DeBoer's been preaching. He just quit on plays, just simply threw him out of bounds, didn't try to look. And when you're an athlete like Jalen Milroe and you played a whole life of football on Thanksgiving and never got tackled or touched or any of that, I mean, it's hard just to throw the ball away. You're a special athlete, but I thought he did a much better job in the second half, Charlie.
Yeah, I did too. And he was facing a lot of pressure. Sometimes it was immediate just in terms of what he saw from a South Florida pass rushing standpoint. And I do think that, early on you could tell that he was trying to continue to try to make something happen. And it wasn't a situation where, he had an opportunity to kind of take off and run in some of those situations. He was running backwards a lot.
Yeah.
And those are plays where, you're right. You need to be able to get out of the tackle box and get rid of the football. And some of those, it just looked like it was tough for him. And some of them, again, holding on to the ball a little too long. And that's something Nick Sheridan talked about on Monday. It's just the need to be able to, get rid of the ball. And again, he did that better in the second half. I think that he just remained collected, because in a game like that, when you're facing all that pressure and then you have big plays just eliminated because of penalties, that can get frustrating. That can wear on a player's psyche. And for Jalen to be able to kind of hang in there, take some punches, but still stay on his feet, I think it was impressive. And I thought he played pretty well in the game. I think it was a game that maybe he wanted to prove a little more, because he didn't play this team last year. He was on the bench for the South Florida game in 2023. But I think going 17 of 27 for almost 200, had a couple touchdowns through the air, had a couple on the ground. And given the yards that he lost from a sack standpoint, you take that out, I think it's a pretty good day for Jalen.
Yeah. Blake, give us a few thoughts on his play.
Yeah, I think kind of like you said, he did do better as the game went on, as far as not trying to do too much or not scrambling backwards in situations that are going to end up with 12, 14-yard losses, especially with the pressure he was facing. And I thought he did a decent job handling the pressure. And South Florida had a couple of really interesting pressure packages, and just the kind of misdirection that they were doing on the defensive line as far as where the pressure was coming from. And whenever you have kind of a piece together offensive line where you've got your guard playing tackle and you've got a right tackle who's young and struggling, and you're missing starters and all this, and you're dealing with holding penalties all night, he was facing pressure almost immediately on a lot of these, known passing downs and plays where you knew you were going to have a drop back. But one thing I did think he did really well was whenever he did extend plays, and a lot of this happened whenever he was stepping up in the pocket and not trying to scramble backwards. But when he would step up in the pocket and then maybe evade left or right, he kept his eyes downfield, and he found guys for, he found Kobe Prentice for the touchdown whenever he scrambled to the left. He found CJ Dupree on a scramble and just kind of whipped the ball out to the sideline. And I think it was either Sheridan or Kalen DeBoer yesterday that said that they were proud of the way that he did that. And that was a big positive from the game. I think overall, not his best game, but not his worst game either, because there were a lot of factors kind of going against things that could have made him successful. I did think maybe he tried to force a deep ball one too many times, especially whenever he wasn't necessarily in a rhythm yet. And taking the sacks were a negative, but I thought there were a lot of positives to take away, like the way that he kept his eyes downfield while scrambling, made a couple of good passes. I thought to throw out to Ryan Williams, and then he did the rest. That was a good play from him. So a good game overall. Some things to learn from, but a step towards what he's trying to get to.
I don't think we've given South Florida enough credit for their defensive strategy. They weren't giving up a deep ball. They were not. I think he was 0 for 7 at one point. Is that right? 1 for 7, 0 for 7. They were grabbing you and pulling you to the ground, or you were not getting behind. I mean, a couple of times Ryan was double teamed, took away those edges. I mean, I thought they did a really good job. I think that's a good football coach. I think he did some smart things. And again, I mean, South Florida is going to have athletes. Now, I was having this debate all week where people are going with a few of my friends who said Wisconsin's going to be better. And I'm like, they might be, but I'm not sure they'll be more athletic. I think South Florida's got some jackrabbits down there, and they're known for chasing them. Before we get out of here, Charlie Potter, short, I know Charlie Potter will have a preview along with Blake and Jimmy Stein of the Wisconsin game before they head down. So just to give me a minute on something that these guys need to do as they prepare this week and they go to Wisconsin for their first road game.
Yeah, I think cleaning up the penalties is big, and some of that you feel for a guy like Will Conformity because he has to be feeling terrible this week, just in terms of what he gave up and probably some things he read on social media, to be frank. But I think the availability of this offensive line is going to be something we continue to monitor throughout the week. Kalen DeBoer had some positive updates on Elijah Pritchett, who we saw play, so he's going to play against Wisconsin. But Caden Proctor, if he's able to go at left tackle, you move Tyler Booker back to left guard, and then either you start Elijah Pritchett or you rotate both of them like you've wanted to do since game one but haven't been able to do. I think the offensive line will be in a better situation, and I don't think we'll see those penalties. So I think that kind of fixes something immediately, and it also eliminates some of the pass rush that you faced in week 2. And like you said, Tim, I think Wisconsin's a good team. But the way that South Florida uses those kind of exotic blitzes and just formations and looks up front, it's not something Alabama's going to see week in and week out. Now, teams could, see the success that they had against Alabama and try to duplicate that. But I don't know if Wisconsin has, just those, twitchy athletes on the edge that South Florida did. So I think just, cleaning up some of the things in pass pro, cleaning up some of the penalties, and then eliminating some of those explosive runs. I think if Alabama can do those 3 things, they're going to be in really good shape this week.
Blake, get us out of here.
Yeah, I think I want to see more of the way that Alabama finished the game against South Florida, and the way that it was almost businesslike. It was kind of like what we expected the entire game to be like, in the way that they just went out there, pounded the ball, and just executed at a really high level, especially offensively. And I think Alabama, and I mentioned this in a post on the message board earlier this week, but I think Jam Miller and Justus Haynes are together probably the best backfield Alabama's had in 5 or 6 years, if that. Like, really, you go back to, like, obviously Najee Harris was a great running back, but as far as a tandem and a 1-2 punch that you have, it's been a long time since Alabama's had 2 guys this dynamic. And then you add in Jalen Milroe's legs, and that's a whole nother factor to it. But I think if this is a good run blocking offensive line, and if they can show up and they can sustain long drives, which is what we've been wanting to see this offense do since the beginning. Obviously, in Western Kentucky, against them, there were a lot of 2-play explosive play drives, and we didn't really see them sustain something really long. And then they struggled against South Florida. I think this is the game where you really want to see, especially if you get a healthy offensive line, you can see this team run the ball, take what the defense gives them, and try to see them sustain 8, 9, 10 play drives. I think if they're able to do that, kind of how they were able to do towards the end of the game against South Florida, even though they scored somewhat quickly on some long runs, if they're able to do that, I think they'll have a lot of success against Wisconsin.
For you guys looking for Charlie Potter and Blake's coverage, team coverage, they do a great job. I mean, it's an absurd amount of content. They do a fantastic job. Also, Charlie brings all the cheer to the team. He's our pick-me-up, puts a smile on our face when we need him. You can find him on BamaOnLine.com. It's fun. It's a fun place to be, the round table. And as luck would have it, this week you've got 50% off. You go to BamaOnline.com. You get 50% off an annual. We are worth the $40 or whatever that costs, spread over 365 days. I was told there'd be no math. I don't know what that breaks down to, but please check out Charlie and Blake. And you guys, we're looking for your coverage the rest of the week.
Appreciate it, Tim. Soon as I get kick you guys in the ass to get you guys ready to go.
Let's go. Bringing in Jimmy Stein, who apparently just auditioned for the remakes of The Soprano. Oh, I thought you were wearing a velvet jumpsuit for a minute.
Oh, that would be
I didn't see the Alabama. I thought you were out here in the velvet suit.
Hey, if someone's thinking about me for Christmas, put that
Hey,
number 1 on the list.
I thought you were out here looking like Paulie. I didn't know they were reshooting The Sopranos. And Andrew Bone, welcome to the show, guys. Before we get started, I saved this for you guys. We've got a commercial. I'm not going to do a great job, but look, we don't do a lot of promotion on BamaOnLine, but Roback, R-H-O-B-A-C-K, R-H-O-B-A-C-K, is something we all believe in. They do a great job with the NIL. Jalen Milroe's a big supporter. And the biggest thing for us is it's actually comfortable and people like it. So we're just not throwing it out there. But give me a second. We want to let you know that there's 20% off Roback. You can use the code BAMA20 on roback.com for a 20% off offer this week. That's how long it's going to last, till the end of the week. You can get the shorts, the shirts, the polos, anything you want to get. For those of you not familiar with Roback, they've just released their new licensed game day collection. Looks pretty good. We've seen a lot of people actually wearing it without the promotion. But again, you can get the polo, the hoodie, the Q-zip. And again, Jalen Milroe, Quinn Ewers, a lot of big names back this up. And everybody I know that wears it, and I've got one hoodie. I'm a big fan of the hoodie. I haven't tried anything else. Love the fact it is so comfortable. It's so light and easy. And again, go to rhoback.com. Discount code BAMA20, and you get 20% off for first new buyers. All right, guys, let's talk football. We're not just going to stick to Alabama. We're going to get a little bit into the other stuff. But first, Jimmy and I, we talked about after the game. Andrew was actually at the game. We've already discussed the game a little bit. But, Andrew, I want you were at the game. Give us some views from what you were seeing while there. Just touch on a few things that stood out, whether it be the atmosphere, Nick Saban, the pregame crowd, the postgame crowd, how the crowd stayed there in a pretty tight game. Give us some thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, it was a packed house, obviously for the Saban Field dedication. My son went to his first ever Alabama football game, so that was pretty exciting. He was 3 years old, so had to break him in finally. We took him down to the 8A game, did a test run, but he did pretty good. I think he stayed till about halftime of this one, but I stayed throughout the entire game, and it was a fun experience. The crowd was loud, really late in the game, obviously when Alabama started to pull away. But I kept making some notes on my phone throughout the game, and the notes that I kept looking back over just kept saying, Tim Keenan. I mean, he was outstanding, and obviously when he won the SEC Defensive Player of the Week, wasn't really that big of a surprise, based on my notepad on my phone. But I thought he played really well. I thought the defensive line overall, seeing some of those guys step up on the defensive front was good to see. Tim Smith had a good game. I saw Damon Payne in there a little bit. We hadn't really called his name much this season, but seeing him, pretty active in the game was encouraging. But tough game. Let's not. South Florida's an interesting team. We knew, last year, they played tough, but was it just because Jalen wasn't in the game and it was raining? They had just come off the loss to Texas, but credit to them. They came out fired up. They believed that they could go into Bryant-Denny and win the game, and they gave Alabama hell for 3.5 quarters, and they were able to pull. Alabama was able to pull away, and hopefully learned a few things from that game as well.
Tell you, the one thing we know about South Florida, and I touched on this with Charlie and Blake, if you cover recruiting, there's athletes out the rear down there. There's athletes. Literally, one of the first stories when we got in this business where they were chasing jackrabbits. Some of the kids would chase jackrabbits, turn them in. They got $5 or whatever it was. Think of a human being chasing a rabbit through an open field, and then you think of Jerry Judy's pass running, you kind of probably figure some of it out. So We know they have athletes. They're also going to have a lot of swagger, right? They're not going to be, they didn't look intimidated walking in. And this is 2 years in a row. I'm torn on whether you'll play them or not because I think they're dangerous. But you do get a look that you're not going to get. I mean, kind of prepares you for Tennessee, right, Jimmy?
No, that's a great point because South Florida is very unique in the way they play offense. They spread you out, and I mean spread you out. And then they have not just an athlete at quarterback, but he's sort of like an old school fullback. He weighs about 230 pounds. So they've spread you out. They made you light in the box, and then they hammer you with the 230-pound quarterback. That's very difficult, and Alabama's unlikely to see anything like that. Yes, Tennessee is going to, spread you out, and Tennessee's going to have a very similar offensive attack, but they don't have a 230-pound fullback playing quarterback. They're going to do it differently. Nico's going to do it with his arm, whereas Byron Brown does it with his legs. I do think the defense struggled to some extent, although not greatly, but they struggled to some extent with the fact that South Florida spreads you out and then runs the quarterback. That's tough, but overall, they only gave up one touchdown. I think the key to the win, because there needed to be a key to actually winning this game, it was so tight for about 54 minutes. The key to the win was the defense was holding South Florida out of the end zone, forcing field goals, forcing punts. South Florida only scored one touchdown, and that's why Alabama won the game, because the offense struggled enough to where, hey, that could have been a loss if the defense wasn't holding them out of the end zone, but they did.
Yeah, I think the one thing fans are really going to have to adjust to is this can happen. I mean, this is, I love the movie Any Given Sunday, but any given Saturday, you can get your butt beat. You can get your butt upset. You don't believe me? Ask Notre Dame, ask Auburn, ask Oregon, who was just happy to get out of there with a win over Boise State, who clearly was competitive. Utah, another borderline top 10 team, squeaking one out, where they basically got shut out. I think they got shut out in the second half. So it's hard to be prepared mentally for every game. And I think it's especially hard to be prepared mentally when you just absolutely thrash somebody 63-0. Your Sunday film study, the coaches can't even gripe at you, right? They got nothing to say. Well, this Sunday they have plenty to say, Andrew.
Yeah, I think so. And, it's going to be a tough environment up in Wisconsin. And Wisconsin's not, I don't think they're the Wisconsin that, is going to be really that scary, but it's going to be a tough environment. I mean, it's going to be a loud environment, 11 a.m. kickoff. That place is going to be jumping. I know a lot of Alabama fans that are going up there this weekend, and, a lot of people are hoping to see a little bit of a better performance from this team than they saw on this past weekend. I think they will. I think they're going to have some confidence. I think they're going to wake up a little bit after this past weekend and go up there and put on a big performance.
I think Green Bay Packers being at home really helped Alabama's attendance because, I do that. I look at stuff like, hey, who's in town? Is the basketball, when Bama played, was it TCU, Kansas State a few years ago in the Sugar Bowl? I knew the Pelicans were playing, so we were able just to switch over there and make that easy trip. I think other people will do that. I do think the 11 a.m. Now, maybe it's just the SEC in me thinking this, but I think the early start face is better for the opponent because you haven't got that rowdy throw a beer crowd. Now, again, that could be the SEC in me thinking it because LSU at 11 a.m. is not the same LSU at 7 p.m., Jimmy, thoughts on going to Madison?
Yeah, it is going to be a tough environment, and I think that's the key here. I don't think it's what makes this game a little scary for Alabama. It's not what Wisconsin has. It's not Tyler Van Dyke, who is a good player, and Luke Fickell's a good coach, and Wisconsin's going to be good at the line of scrimmage. I'll tell you that right now. I haven't even really watched Wisconsin's first two games. I know they struggle, but even without watching, I'll tell you right now, Wisconsin's going to be good at the line of scrimmage. That's where they've always been good, and Fickell's a good coach. What's scary about the game to me, guys, is that Alabama just simply hasn't played great on the road for 3 years. Went back and looked and had a post on the roundtable earlier this week. In their last 14 true road games, 9 of those games have been close. 9 of the 14. Alabama lost 3 of them, but 9 of the 14 have been close. Now, Wisconsin's not as scary as playing LSU in Baton Rouge or even playing Tennessee in Knoxville. I'm not saying that they're at that level of opponent, but Alabama just simply hasn't played great on the road, and Alabama didn't play great last Saturday. They'll tell you that. So I think this is more about Alabama and potential road struggles. DeBoer had a great team last year, national runner-up. He didn't play well on the road. He had one easy road win in East Lansing. The other 4 games they played on the road, they struggled to win. There were 10-point games or less against some teams that weren't great, like Stanford. So it's just kind of tough to win on the road in 2024. That's the challenge for Alabama, to get away from home and still play well against a quality opponent.
Yeah, the weekend itself, I was looking at the slate of what we've got ahead of us. Not a terrific weekend, but I was going to get some of your thoughts on LSU, South Carolina. That's a pretty good game. We got Notre Dame going to Purdue after that loss. Now, I don't know how you really come back. There's a couple of games in the SEC I want to talk about. And Andrew, I don't know how much of these you saw being on the road, but Kentucky got thrashed by South Carolina.
That was probably the most surprising.
It was a thrashing. Kentucky had Brock Vandergriff, former Georgia quarterback. They could get nothing done. Dillard Stewart, we knew he was a menace, the South Carolina defensive end, but just shows you. I mean, Kentucky's got to face Georgia this week, and if y'all remember last year, Stoops is trying to get out of there. I mean, if you go and make people, you remember he was getting the Aggies job. You make them think you're leaving, and then you got to come back in that locker room. It might be hard to stare those guys in the face.
Dylan Stewart, I'm surprised at how quickly he's come along. We knew how good he was. I mean, he was a terror in that All-American or the Under Armour game last year. But man, he is ferocious off the edge. He's going to be a problem for a long time. I mean, that South Carolina LSU game is going to be very interesting, especially in Columbia, because you got a one and one team at LSU. It could be 1-2 after a trip to Columbia. So we'll see. But one other game I wanted to mention that I'm really intrigued in this weekend is Memphis at Florida State. Mike Norvell's old school. They're 2-0. Memphis is very good. I mean, they're predicted to win their conference. What if Florida State goes down 0-3 after this weekend? That's going to be a really tough game for Florida.
You know who's sweating that game is Kirk Herbstreit, because those Noles are really going to be pissed if they keep losing. He keeps costing now. They've lost 2 commitments this week. They've lost a big defensive tackle. They've lost a defensive end and Javian Hilson. So they have some struggles. So some things going on there. Another one, Jimmy, I wanted to get your comments on. How about Texas A&M at Florida? I mean, it doesn't seem like it, but you got a first-year Aggies coach who lost at home to Notre Dame, who flipped around and lost at home to Northern Illinois. So you got these guys playing. This is a massive game for a first-year head coach and Billy Napier, who's under some fire.
He really is, and I understand they're going to start DJ Lagway. And to me, I mean, I'm not there every day, but to me, this is the direct result of the heat Napier's under, because I think the traditional coaching move is to start your veteran in Graham Mertz. He's a veteran player. He started for multiple years. He's a good player a year ago. I mean, this is a quality player, but the fans, the boosters, the support, they're all super excited about the true freshman. I can't help but think Napier's starting Lagway as sort of like a last-ditch effort to save his job, frankly, that he can maybe ride Lagway's coattails through the end of the year and say, hey, this is my guy. All this excitement that y'all are feeling, this is because of me. I delivered this guy to Gainesville. Otherwise, you start your veteran against what's a pretty good Texas A&M team. I think A&M wins this game myself. I just think they're the better team. They have more good players, and I really feel for Billy. He's a good guy. But, boy, the SEC is just brutal. Florida's eaten up some pretty good coaches down there. McElwain, Muschamp. Now it looks like Billy Napier's not going to last very long there either.
The thing with Lagway can sell is hope. You can tell your recruits you're going to play with Lagway. You're not going to find a lot of recruits dying to play with Graham Mertz. No offense to Graham, but he's a last-year guy. But this is a true freshman that you can sell him on. I mean, we saw the kickstart of Keelan Russell, right? You got a commitment and domino. Also, I mean, the one thing that I think about that feel pressure is you struggle. And let's be clear, DJ Lagway's NIL was huge. Mm-hmm. So you got guys that gave money to get him on campus to that NIL. They're probably pissed to see an average product. Andrew, talk about how that NIL is going to affect some of these guys and speed up their play process.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously, if you're struggling on the field and you got a guy sitting on the bench that, maybe can beat a pretty good NIL, you're going to have a lot of boosters and people that are going to be, demanding. And obviously, they're not the ones making the calls. They are the ones that are going to be writing the checks here in the future. So, I think with DJ Lagway going back into his home state, I'm sort of a little on the other side of Jimmy on this. I think Florida's going to give A&M one heck of a game. I think DJ Lagway is a special quarterback. He's going back to his home state, Texas A&M. Trying to flip them late in the process last year. This is a big motivation game, especially for Billy Napier, who is, as we know, is on the hot seat. He needs a signature win. Going into College Station would be a big win, even though they have one loss on their record. This would be a good start, and it could show Florida fans, it could show boosters, it can show future recruits that Florida, has something to build on with DJ Lagway. So I think it's going to be a really competitive game. I could see Florida going in and winning it, but yeah, I mean, I do think Mike Elko's one fantastic coach, and he's going to have something in store for DJ Lagway, no doubt about it.
While we have you guys, do us a favor, hit that subscribe button. The site's been growing. This is the BamaOnLine.com Big Show. This is where you get all 6 of us in our glorious glamour. We don't have a company uniform line, but we appreciate y'all being here. It's been a popular show. We have fun with it. And of course, you can find us at BamaOnline.com this week, the Wisconsin week. They have a flash sale that's 50% off. Just go to BamaOnline.com. You get half off an annual. Again, we're worth the $40 over 365 days. Even our movie recommendations, Andrew's Fish and Dave Matthews tour reviews, and Jimmy's outrage, and of course Joseph Hastings giving us. Jimmy has some tangents. I like it. Jimmy's soapbox is like it folds out quickly. I think his shoes have press a button and he's on it. And also we have Joseph Hastings with his on the road barbecue reviews and everything else. But enjoy y'all being here. Hit that like and subscribe button. Any final thoughts on this weekend? Bama's on the road for the first time. We talked about that. Auburn, let's touch on Auburn real quick. Let's get everybody pissed at us. My private messages have been too quiet. Let's ramp those up. I mean, very weird performance. I thought Cal's defense was fantastic. I thought they played really well. Forced 5 turnovers, and I felt they had a lot of pressure on them. Didn't really get to see Cam Coleman involved a lot. Again, a phenomenal freshman to go with Jeremiah Smith and Ryan Williams. But thoughts on Auburn struggling early, because there was 2 sentiments. You had a pretty good argument in the Alabama fan base, right? Auburn would be 5-0 and much improved, or Auburn would not be very good. Thoughts on that Cal game, Jimmy?
Really impressed by Cal. Every Power 5 or Power 4 football team is dangerous. They all have good athletes. But in the end, Auburn turned over the ball 5 times. I mean, Alabama turned it over 5 times to Ole Miss in 2015. Lost the game. Alabama turned over 3 times against South Florida, nearly, was in a highly competitive game till 5 minutes left. You turn over the ball 5 times against someone with a pulse, it's going to be really difficult. And I think ultimately that's why Auburn lost. They can clean up some of that stuff. I don't think Auburn's quite as bad as some of their fans or some of the other SEC fans will have you believe based on this weekend. But frankly, to get up on my soapbox, there was too much optimism about Auburn going into this year. You can't lose to New Mexico State and look as terrible as they did in their bowl game against Maryland and just fix that in an offseason. Yes, Auburn's getting some young talent in. Their freshman receivers are exciting. They're recruiting what they got's going on exciting, but that ain't helping them right now. The only thing they're playing with right now are some of Harson's guys, some of these portal guys, and some guys Hugh's trying to develop. But this Auburn team's not really good. They were never going to be really good. I said before the season 7-5, even as bad as they look this weekend, I don't think I'm changing that. I just think they're a 6-6, 7-5 football team.
So, Andrew, did you see the Harsin tweet? A little congratulations to the winner sitting at the lake with his Yeti cup of coffee. I mean, look, what kind of world are we in where Bill Belichick's on Instagram and we got former head coaches trolling their former teams?
Yeah, he's certainly a lot richer sitting at the lake. But yeah, I thought before the season started, when I kept seeing everything that popped up, Auburn wise on their social accounts and stuff like that, the Auburn football accounts, it was all about the freshmen. You never really saw anything about some of the upperclassmen, seniors, stuff like that. You just kept seeing freshman highlights, and I'm thinking that's probably not a good sign. When you're only really showcasing your freshmen out there, because your freshmen aren't going to, they're not going to lead you to championships. They're not going to lead you to a lot of wins. You got to have a lot of really good upperclassmen mixed in with those freshmen. Now, obviously, Ryan Williams has been a stud for Alabama so far, but there's a lot of other talent that's surrounding him too that have been great leaders, and you need that. You need leadership on your team. You need playmakers that are upperclassmen, and I think that's what's lacking at Auburn right now. So it's going to be interesting to see how the rest of the season plays out, especially in the next 2 weeks when Oklahoma comes into town, because Auburn has certainly been selling the future of the program to a lot of recruits. They're doing really well with the recruiting right now, top 6 class in the country according to On3 Sports. Doing obviously really well in state, but a lot of recruits also want to see how you're performing on the field. This isn't Hugh Freeze's first year at Auburn. This is year number 2, so he's got to continue to build on that. See how he does, and if you continue to lose, you're going to lose recruits down the road.
The one thing about it was there was so much high hope for those first 5 games of starting 5-0 because you have Cal, you got New Mexico State, you're at home against Arkansas, you're at home against Oklahoma. Because after that, you're in big-ass trouble. I mean, you're going to Georgia, to Missouri, to Kentucky doesn't look as imposing as it once did, and to Alabama. So you got 4 pretty tough road games. But I don't think Arkansas is a lazy win. I think Arkansas has proven – I mean, they gave a game away against Okie State, And, again, a good point, you're missing a lot of freshmen. And we know Hugh Freeze is going to get talent, and that's why Auburn's so heavy in the NIL. He's not dumb. Hugh Freeze knows it's Jimmy's and Joe's. He can coach football, and most of these guys can. But let's get those guys on campus. Jimmy Stein, we look forward to seeing your preview with Blake and Charlie Potter tomorrow. Again, you can find Jimmy along with Charlie Potter and Blake Byler doing a lot of our team stuff on BamaOnline.com, the roundtable. When we do this show, I can't wait to get back and see what the heck's been brought up and what we're discussing because there's a lot of activity. But, Jimmy, we look forward to seeing you and talking to you, and we'll see you on the roundtable.
See you next week, guys.
See you, Jimmy.
We're going to welcome in Joseph Hastings, who I think has 100 rooms in his apartment or house because he's never in the same spot.
I'm always in the same spot. No, I just changed up the background a little bit.
Dude, every time I see you, you're in a different spot. What the hell's good? What are you going on? I was like, it's like you're breaking into people's houses to do the show.
I've got too many rooms. What can I say?
In the JoJo Mansion. Well, welcome to the show, JoJo. We had a really good recruiting show for y'all that didn't see it yesterday. We're here just to recap some of that. We've had a few more events happening last night, and we're going to go over that. And again, it's going to be kind of quiet on the recruiting trail to some degree because Alabama's on the road. No visitors this coming week. It's going to be the build up to Georgia. So let's talk about.
You just ruined it, Tim. Thank you.
No, I'm saying there's no visitors. We need news, but there's no visitors coming. Alabama literally is on the road, and then they have a off week. So we still have visitors to talk about this week. So let's talk about them. Obviously, we had the nugget on Justus Terry. Joseph, jump in with a few just thoughts on Justus, arriving Saturday. It's kind of inopportune time. Joseph was traveling back from having seen Keelan Russell and Ty Haywood. Andrew was on the way to Tuscaloosa. Our boy just drops in and says, howdy.
Yeah, I get a text from Tim and, getting ready to head back after arriving from Dallas, and Justus Terry is on campus. I was pretty shocked to see the news myself, as were our BOL subscribers, I imagine. But, like we talked about, just massive to get him on campus ahead of the Georgia game. He's somebody that's talked about visiting Alabama a lot at certain points, but you wait to see until he actually gets on campus. He took that official visit in June, but if you recall, back in the spring, he had talked about visiting Alabama for spring, didn't get out there. So, with that kind of caliber of prospect and, somebody who, it's a big deal when you report that he's on campus. You want to wait till he actually gets there. And, broke that big news. Justus Terry, top 10 overall player in the country, one of the top defensive linemen, highly sought after. He was saying back when he was committed to Georgia that Alabama was in his top 2. And if you want to be great, you go to Alabama. So he's been high on Alabama for quite some time. You just want to see him get on campus as much as you can, especially with him being relatively close compared to some other top recruits. But yeah, and he's scheduled to visit for the Georgia game, potentially another game after. I think this was massive for Alabama getting him back on campus at this time.
Yeah, the one thing we've talked about is Georgia has 3 of the top 10 players in the country, around top 10, right? On the defensive line, they're recruiting 3 5 stars, legit homegrown talent. Me and Andrew discussed this off the show before, but can they land all three? I mean, that's the one thing you're looking at. Now, one's kind of an end, and you start telling them they can play different positions and all, but getting Justus, I think Georgia's definitely involved. But, I mean, we see Georgia still out here recruiting. I saw a story yesterday where Georgia's still recruiting Kevin Wynn, who's committed to Florida State. And, Florida State's susceptible to some flips. So, Andrew, talk about, we've been doing this a long time. Talk about trying to land that many guys, because they've already got Isaiah Gibson, who's an edge, but he's a 270-pound edge. He's a Popeye's breakfast away from being 285.
Yeah, I mean, we have talked about this a little bit as far as, can Georgia, get 3 5-star defensive linemen in one class? That's very difficult to do, especially in the NIL era that we live in, because, everybody's, still going to get, a significant NIL deal, especially if you're a 5-star top 100, defensive lineman, not necessarily looking for it, but that schools are certainly going to be offering it to you. And I think Alabama's going to be competitive in that market with Justus Terry. They don't have a lot of defensive line targets that they're still going after right now. A few new names have kind of popped up over the course of the last few weeks, but that's a guy that they have built a very strong relationship with, that they're comfortable with, that has been to campus several times, has a great relationship with Freddie Roach. So that's been very important. That's really been the consistency there with Justus Terry in Alabama. I think he's still, getting familiar with the new staff, but he's been to campus a few times now. Was in Tuscaloosa back in February for that junior day, came back for the official visit. I think he was in Tuscaloosa for the official about 3 days after he decommitted from USC, and had a great weekend. We heard a lot of positive things from that weekend, and then moving forward, it's been sort of an Alabama-Georgia recruiting battle there. So it's going to be interesting to see how the rest of the way plays out. Getting him back on campus for the Georgia games, huge. We talked about it 2 weeks ago. If Alabama can get him on campus for a different game besides the Georgia game, because of all the different people that were going to be in town, that was going to be very beneficial for the Crimson Tide, and they were able to get him on campus this past week. We mentioned.
The one thing about Kirby Smart, we know how much he loves the defensive line. His best teams at Georgia had great defensive linemen. His best teams at Alabama had great defensive linemen. He loves defensive linemen and that one backer that can wreak havoc, that Nakobe Dean type. But when you look at the players Georgia pursuing, they've got 2 guys committed, including Stephen Shivers, 6'4.5", 380 pounds. They got Jaden Jamal Hanna committed. He's 6'5", 270. So they've already got a couple commitments. Now, Elijah Griffith, obviously he's a big name. Isaiah Gibson's committed. But the 2 they're trying to add to this class would be Elijah Griffith, 6'4", 300, Justus Terry, who's 6'5", 275. And again, a guy that could be a bandit. He's got that talent, or again, he could grow to 310 pounds pretty quick. But it should be noted they're still recruiting guys. Kevin Wynn, who we just mentioned, Christian Ingram, who Alabama also offered, the big 6'6", 270-pound guy blowing up as a senior in Georgia. So I don't know if the lock, and I still think you got to say Georgia's involved, but we've heard a lot of guys over the years who were a lock and not necessarily ended up a lock. So I still think there's some recruiting left to do there.
I remember Pat Surtain. He was a lock to LSU for an entire.
I remember when Justus Haynes was a lock to Georgia. Done deal. Caleb Downs, parents loved it. Done deal. Caleb turned him down twice. So, we've seen a lot. Peter Woods was a lock to Alabama. So, I mean, a lock as a junior is not necessarily a lock a day before signing day. And don't forget the Edric Houston drama we went through, with the guy that, last minute flipping out. Andrew, let's talk about Dawson Merritt. Andrew has a great update on BamaOnLine.com. And again, you can get BamaOnLine.com 50% off for an annual. That's a yearly subscription. I mean, it's a very good price. I mean, even though we're a little biased probably, but I think you'll get your entertainment value on the low end scale with Netflix now, like $30 a month. I think we provide you enough value there. Plus, we review every Netflix show. So, Andrew, talk a little bit about Dawson, the kid he is, and what's going on with his recruitment after visiting Nebraska.
Yeah, so just a little backstory. Dawson Merritt, 4-star Wolf commitment for Alabama, committed back in June, has been one of these guys that has said he's solid with his commitment, but was going to take some visits this fall. Spoke with his father the other day, said the trip to Nebraska had been planned for a few months. He wanted to get to a game this season, enjoy the environment. They had recruited him for a long time. They were in his top 2. Commits to Alabama over Nebraska back in June, but he's going to be back in Tuscaloosa in a few weeks for that Georgia game, along with half the other top recruits in the country. But I think the biggest takeaway is you don't want to see a kid go to a different college football game, come out of that weekend saying rethinking my decision, or they flipped to that school, and nothing like that happened. We had a good update with Dawson's father, which is posted on BOL right now, so go check that out, see what he said about Dawson's commitment status with Alabama right now. But I think getting him back on campus in a few weeks is going to be very good, because talked about the environment, how crazy it was for that Nebraska-Colorado game, which you look at some video, you look at some photos, sure, it was a great environment, but just wait till you get to Bryant-Denny for that Georgia game on 28th.
Yeah, Joseph, tell us what you expect with that Georgia game. Like, me and Andrew have kind of seen it. You've kind of seen the big game. We'll get into where this falls on how big of a game it is, but just give us, go ahead and give us your thoughts on how big of a game it is. And I don't mean the impact, because look, if there wasn't a 12-man playoff team, this would be historically huge, probably, because then you lose this game, you got to go undefeated, and you're probably looking at this loss and playing possibly Georgia in the SEC championship game. We've already seen this story. That's a lot of Bama, Georgia. They go. So just put it on the parameters of what this game means and how significant it is from different angles.
I've seen a lot of big games, in college football, just in terms of the teams I've covered and everything in years prior. That's gone on with those games. I don't think there's a more anticipated game in my time doing this than the Georgia-Alabama one. Just in terms of, Georgia doesn't go to Tuscaloosa every year or every other year. So there's that special element of it. It's 2 of the top teams in the country, 2 of the top 4 teams in the country. So it's a highly anticipated matchup. As for the results on the field, yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. This isn't going to be something where if Alabama loses a 3-point game, they lose every single recruit and Justus Terry is automatically going to Georgia or anything like that. I don't think one game is necessarily going to determine that. Remember, 2 years ago, Alabama went 10-2 in the regular season, missed the college football playoff, also those heartbreakers to Tennessee and LSU, and still signed one of the greatest classes of all time. Had a big month in December, even after all of that. So, obviously recruits do want to see, a competitive game at the very least. You want that to happen, but yeah, I don't believe this is going to be a make or break type game for Alabama on the recruiting trail.
Andrew, share some thoughts. I mean, we've seen some pretty big games. That 9-6 LSU game was absurd. The Tebow visit for the Florida, Andre Smith, we talked about that, was absurd. Put that on the perspective now, considering, to me, the biggest significant is Nick Saban's gone. And Nick Saban owned Georgia in many ways and completely owned them. And now everybody's waiting to see, is Kirby actually taking that mantle? And Kirby, look, I'll be honest, Kirby Smart can lose this game. He's a great coach. What he's done, he is a great football coach in every regard. Every now and then you have a guy that's a wart on your butt. I mean, Hugh Freeze was that for Nick Saban.
Yeah, I mean, this is a big game for Georgia. I mean, going on the road to Tuscaloosa, I mean, they've got some big games, on the road this season, including a trip out to Texas. It won't be really easy. So this is a big game for them. But every recruit that I feel like we've talked to over the course of the last couple of weeks, I mean, it's like everybody's coming to Tuscaloosa for that game. And I would expect, somebody asked me the other day on the round, or asked us on the round table the other day, should we expect 200 plus recruits in town? No, you shouldn't. You should expect probably around 100 recruits in town. It's just not going to be every recruit and their family that gets invited to this particular game. You're going to have your premier guys in the country be in there. So and everybody wants to see, what is Coach Kalen DeBoer gonna be able to do against Kirby Smart, because all offseason we've heard about how he is obviously one of the best coaches in the country, top 5 coach in America, one of the best, could potentially be up there with Kirby Smart in the SEC. So how's he going to perform in his first big test? Not saying that Wisconsin's not a big test, because that's a big road test, but big test against Kirby Smart, 2 weeks. And I hate getting ahead of ourselves here, but that's going to be, or 3 weeks away. But
We're
that's
just talking recruiting. We're not talking team.
I
We're
know.
not. You're leaking out. We're talking visitors.
Yeah. I mean, we're going to have a list that's going to go ahead and go up in the next, probably few days on BOL. Go ahead and get that kind of cranked up. But man, so many kids are already saying that they're coming in for that weekend. It's going to be pretty exciting.
I think there's more people that want to come than will be able to come. I think you touched on that earlier. Joseph, give us a thought before we get out of here.
Just on the Georgia game and the recruiting.
Just life. Marvel's got a new movie. You're excited about this weekend. I mean, it's
how was the trip to Texas? Did you get any good food out there besides just going to Chipotle?
Okay, yeah. So that's the biggest news. That's the biggest takeaway, other than talking with 2 5-star commitments, is that I did not get Chipotle for the first time on a recruiting road trip. I did not get Chipotle. I had Heart 8 barbecue, got some brisket, some chicken, some mac and cheese. I got a shrimp and bacon thing on a stick. I mean, it was awesome. So it's funny. I actually went there 6 years ago. I didn't realize I'd gone there before, but once I arrived, I was like, okay, I know how things are. It was fantastic. Cost a lot more than I expected, but it was really good.
We saw your plate. I don't know what you expected to play, but when we saw it, we knew it was expensive.
Yeah,
right, Andrew.
I mean, he was full, and he still had a whole chicken sitting on his plate.
Yeah, it was a whole tray full of food. Andrew where's the place you take us, Andrew? You and I go to lunch?
Martin's Barbecue.
Yeah, it's the same type deal. That's why Andrew's like, Joseph, that's a lot of food. I was like, I'll let Andrew order at Martin's. I was looking around. I thought we had people joining us. I didn't know who else was coming. But I tell you what, again, and this is an unpaid promo, but they do a good job. Those baked beans are sometimes key to barbecue. So anyways, guys, we'll be doing some more shows towards the end of the week. Hopefully this road game, 11 o'clock. Not used to that. We're going to have the live show after the game. We're not used to that. Usually we have the live show, but it's running at 11 o'clock. And look, Bama's last game, did that thing last 5 hours? That's how Florida game lasted friggin' forever. And then the first one lasted forever with 63 points. So hopefully at 11 a.m. we'll be a little bit full of queso, little cheese dip. We'll be good to go, and we'll see you guys live afterwards. As always, we appreciate you coming in. And if you get a chance, give us a subscribe, hit that subscribe button and a like, and, come join us on BamaOnLine, and we handle all this stuff. But for Tim Watts, Andrew Bone, say goodbye, Andrew.
See you guys later. Thanks for watching.
Joseph Hastings.
See y'all later. Thank you.
We will see you later on, and thank you for being Alabama fans and BOL members.